Dancy, Oki, Dumelang, and hello, everybody. It is an honor to welcome you to today's digital panel, Theatrical Interrogations, Cops in the Spotlight. This panel is featuring three incredible artists and creators, and myself as the moderator of the panel. On behalf of these humans, my co-curator, Nikki Shafiula, as well as the entire NAC team, Tatawao, welcome. All are welcome in this space. My name is Mbowe Morale. I am the child of Opa Kutume Morale and Shirley Rico Kedije Ramadimeja Mangwale. I was raised by the Mangwales, whose roots in the mountainous region of Rampathlele, within the borders of South Africa, run deeper than my mind can imagine. Today, I find myself in Treaty 7 territory, and specifically in Mokinstis, the Nitsitapi name for the place colonially known as Calgary, and the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations. Mokinstis is home to the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Wesley First Nation. This land that I'm on is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Mokinstis is a place that gives reverence to its waterways, the Bow and Elbow rivers, knowledgeable bodies of water that I constantly visit for comfort, connection, and guidance. I am grateful for this place that watches over me, that holds me while I am away from home, and the peoples of the plain stewardship of the water, the trees, the birds, fish, the rocks, as living beings, part of an ecosystem with no masters over another's life. In thinking about this teaching, I'm reminded that in resisting networks of systems that stand in opposition to our being, including the colonial legacy of policing, we are surrounded by existing knowledges and existing ways of being to help us dismantle and reconstruct better futures. Today, we will be having a conversation about the violent system of policing and what role theater plays in shaping societal relationships to police, prisons, and surveillance culture. I'm joined by three incredible panelists. First to be introduced is Omari Newton. He's an actor, a writer, director, producer, a lot of things, and very multi-talented. He's based in Vancouver, and today our discussion with him will be talking about his work as a playwright on Black and Blue Matters and Sal Capone, the lamentable tragedy of. My apologies for that little stutter. Welcome, okay. Omari.
Thank you for having me.
Secondly, we have Makambe K. Samamba, who is a playwright, performer, all-around incredible human, currently joining us from Brampton today. And today we'll be focusing on her work, Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers. Welcome, Makambe.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we are joined today by Taiwo Afolabi, the Canada Research Chair in Socially Engaged Theatre and the Director of the Centre for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina, where he's currently based, with over a decade of experience working across a variety of creative and community contexts, including theatre and social justice, theatre and policing, and equity in the theatre world. Welcome, Taiwo. It is such a pleasure to have you all here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The panelists' full bios will be available on the website alongside this recording, and I encourage everybody to give them a proper read. These are some remarkable artists and humans, and I can't wait for you to hear from them. So we are just gonna dive right into the meat of it all. We have a great set of discussion or a great conversation that is awaiting us today. So based on the projects that I introduced, folks, about you on. I'm just curious what your dreams and goals were when you first started this project. What was the life you hoped for this project to take on? I will start with Omari.
Well, when I first started writing The Lamentable Tragedy of Sal Capone, it was around 2007, 2008, and it was inspired by the tragic shooting of Freddie Villanueva, who was a young, BIPOC individual from my hometown of Montreal. And I just remember, at the time I was in my mid-20s, and the sense of rage and frustration I felt about seeing yet another case of a young person of color being shot by police. And, I didn't know where or how to channel this frustration. And, I come from a background as being an MC and a poet. So, to me, art and activism has always been kind of inextricably linked, and it ended up evolving. I was working with my friend and co-collaborator and mentor, Diane Roberts, and what started off as just this rage and frustration turned into this hip-hop theater piece, Sal Capone. And my hope was just to see these stories that were so important to me and this voice represented in my chosen medium, which is the theater. That was my hope, was just to represent for at the time, it was a black youth.
Yes, thank you, Omari. And yeah, I think what definitely stands out is how you tell the stories of Canadian youth as well, Canadian Black youth, and really highlighting those. On the other hand, and not far away, is Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, which tells a US-based story. But again, this is a Turtle Island, borders are fake, all of that, So experiences for Black folks are universal, usually. So we have, Makambe, could you tell us what your goals and dreams for this were, when you started writing and, writing the play?
Mm-hmm. Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers was heavily inspired by the murder of Trayvon Martin, who, at the time that I learned about who he was in his story, my younger brother was around the same age, and it just freaked me out. I was really agitated on a spiritual level. So the first impulse that I had in terms of writing or creating or Our Fathers is a solo show that I perform. So in terms of moving through, my first impulse was to what? Understand that and understand the energy, the rage and the grief that was coursing through my body. And I just wanted to do something with it. So that was the first impulse, which manifested as a sort of a 10-minute little solo piece that I did in a performance intensive workshop. After doing that 10-minute piece and realizing that there was something there, the intention that I set for the project was actually to hold space for Black folks to grieve, to hold space and to hold ceremony. What I realized with the explosion of the BLM movement and the unfortunate reality that it just seemed like every day, every couple of days, every couple of weeks, there was a different Black person who had lost their life to white supremacy, whose name was in the headlines. It was like a new hashtag, every so often. And I realized that while the activism is very, very important, that if, God forbid, that was a place at my dinner table that was empty in my family's house, we would have to take time to stop and mourn. I didn't want people to forget that all of these hashtags and all of these names are lives, full 3D lives. So the idea for Our Fathers came from an impulse to say okay, so we have an idea or we have a concept of, this young person, but we really don't know much about their life. We know only about their death. And that didn't feel fair. So I wanted to give, from my own creative perspective, an audience, a Black audience, the opportunity to spend some time with the life of this infamous teen through my own lens and imagination. And yeah, what emerged was Our Father, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers.
Thank you, Makambe. And I loved what you mentioned previously in an interview, how you said this is a prayer for Black life. And I definitely see that and appreciate you seeing the need for grieving as a part of this instead of us moving and giving life to the hashtags, giving full D, 3D life. That these are humans. These are, giving humanity to that. And Taiwo, you have done remarkable work in different contexts. And I'm curious what your goals and dreams for those processes are.
Thank you so much, Poe. Before I answer your question, in honor of Makambe and Omari's work, and also the conversation that we're having today, I just like to say a simple prayer, because I think that the question around policing, around abolition movements and social justice and all that, they're very heavy, very contentious. People's lives are involved. So I just pray, God, that you help us, that our words today will heal, that it will rebuke, that it will correct, that it will redirect us, and it will help us to center ourselves and just see through things, and that at the end of it all, that we will be able to show forth love, that in the midst of all this, that we will heal for as many that need to be healed, that our words will just not fall down like that, but just like my sister and brother, they've offered in their work so powerfully, that these words will spring forth life. So answer your question, I'm from Nigeria, and I did study in did my undergrad in Jos. It's not central part of the country. The country has over 180 million population, way more than Canada, and 6 geopolitical zones. So I did my undergrad in the middle, not central, we call it. And so my sensibility and sensitivity at a very formative stage of my own practice has always been working in community, whether on issues around displacement, whether on issues around brutality, whether on issues around health. It's the question of humanizing experiences and stories that it's at the center of my work. And I'm constantly asking myself, in what ways can I use theater, whether we can call it as an instrument or as a tool or as a weapon, whatever terminology or whatever it is at that point in time. But how can I center these beautiful art form to explore experiences and then humanize that, so that we can start seeing the nuance around our experiences, our lived experiences. And that's really what started the impetus for a lot of my work. And so in the context of our conversation today, when I was doing my work in Victoria, working with specifically with immigrants and refugees and people of color, it became very important to me, especially in their conversation, their perspective when it comes to policing and the justice system. And I was really asking myself, what exactly, I really didn't get it, because I didn't grow up here, right? So I started doing a bit of research, I started asking questions, and boom, then I landed myself in this place where I realized that, wow, there's a lot of history about those that have died and those that continue to die in the hand of the surveillance and the policing system that we have. And that's really how that all of that started for me. And I asked myself, how can theater then become a tool for me to start making obvious these stories, even though I don't write, stories like my brother and my sister here, I devise with community, but how can theater become that means to actually humanize those experiences? And, that's how it started from.
Yes, thank you, Taiwo. In all of your responses, I see what Taiwo has hit on, which is humanizing experiences, bringing to life these hashtags, go like moving through the rage that's within us, linking art to activism, and like bringing life to these experiences. And I couldn't imagine three better humans to be in the same room together who are doing exactly that. I am curious from the processes that you've engaged in creating this work, facilitating these processes, what has been surprising for you? I'd like to hear from Makambe first.
Can you give me that question again, sibling?
Absolutely, love. Yes. So, from the process of creating it, or even when showing it, the community and reception of it, what has been like a surprise for you from this process, and facilitating it and whatnot. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like there have been a few surprises. One of the biggest surprises is the fact that I feel like the piece and the project is much bigger than me. And I often feel like the process of acting, the process of performing or writing is just like a channeling. But there's things that I'm like, yeah, and then like that was me. I feel like I know what happened there. But with our fathers, the frequency is different than my other work. And so what I've realized is that the play always takes care of itself. It always tells me where it wants to be programmed, when it wants to be programmed, who it wants to be on the team, facilitating the creation, the sharing, the dissemination of it. It releases the people or the circumstances that do not suit it, and it attracts the people and circumstances that do suit it. And it's really mind-blowing for me the way I feel like the entity of our fathers, sons, lovers, and little brothers has its own path. And I feel like I'm on that path for X amount of time, but I don't feel like I will necessarily, for example, be the sole performer forever. I feel like the piece itself is bigger than me. And though I am currently the steward of it, that might not always be the case. And that spiritual and energetic sensation blows my mind every time that I think about it. When I think of just the experiences that I've had, like the way that the piece was even initially programmed, where it premiered, like it those stories of like, oh, like what are the chances that you would be in this place and then you're not even trying to get the thing made, but the perfect person to help you make the thing overhears your conversation. And then like the trajectory of our fathers has so many of those little like maybe serendipitous is not actually the right word, but like I just feel like, ancestors were like, and then you go this side, you come like this, talk to this person, don't talk to that person. No, we said go to the left. And so that particular energy has been a huge part of how I wrote the piece, meaning like I was just trusting sort of this energetic wave of like the like whimsical or like this doesn't. I feel like for me, the piece breaks sort of certain storytelling rules that I might have tried to like fit it into, but it doesn't let me do things that it's not here to do. So it's like, okay, how do you actually just understand the assignment and trust the assignment? And also when I traveled to the US to like research, I felt called to go to the US to just like connect with energy and just meditate and just also pay respect and also like have a sense that I would know what I was talking about. And just the way that trip worked out and the places I was able to go and the ways that I was able to like connect with people and go to the exact places I needed to go. It's actually magical. And that has been the biggest surprise. There's also been like really incredible individuals I have met, some who are actually part of our history. I met an incredible woman named Kamala who talked to me and shared that she was part of the task force that was brought together after the murder of Michael Wade Lawson, who's a 17-year-old killed in Mississauga in 1988. How basically a group of people were brought together to like reevaluate and offer suggestions in terms of policing standards. And so that list of recommendations that they made, including like that, the one that was most like shocking to me was that like that police officers had to at least have a high school diploma. Some of the recommendations they made included like the release of like heightened weight restrictions. Some of their research discovered that 20 to 30% of the police force were related. And so the culture of like taking care, so there was just like, which is like incredible work that like, I was like, history, and then she was like, bye. And so there are all of those types of moments. And then sometimes you just meet a mom who you don't even talk very much, but like you just share something sort of in each other's eyes. And I had a woman after the show just like asked to give me a hug, which is sometimes a lot of people's response. So sometimes I end up sort of taking care of people in a way after the piece, because like I sort of know that experience of like where I'm going, whereas like receiving the offering for the first time can be quite overwhelming for people. So when I do feel called to connect and go out once in a while, I'm asked for a hug, and if I'm comfortable doing that, I will do that. So this woman asks me for a hug, I give her a hug, I burst into tears, and then she like rocks me like a little baby. And I was like, I didn't even know I needed that cry. So the show continues to like take care of me, take care of itself. And I'm surprised and inspired to see where it's going to take itself next.
That's incredible, Makambe. And Taiwo said something really potent. Is that potent? I don't know words. All right, thank you. I often say there are 7 languages on my tongue, so it's all good. So yes, Taiwo mentioned that what you just described is just divine programming and orchestration, something that that's just so out of our hands, just humans cannot control. And, so that's incredible to hear of those experiences and having the piece take care of itself and also you. That's amazing. That's a great surprise. Taiwo, I'm going to pass this question to you as well. What has been some surprises in the works that you've facilitated and the processes you've undergone?
Thank you. I feel that, because what we're talking about and what we're doing, these issues, they've involved so many lives, so many spirits, so many blood have been shed for it. So there's always that spirituality. There's always that something you can, it's out of you. You're just there to do your beats and you leave, right? So I hear what Makambe is really really describing. It's very surreal. I feel that in community. My process is I use for me it's about storytelling, devising, and so I go into community and what's their story, and from there we create something. Interestingly, this is one of the aspects of my work that I've not written anything about, which is very interesting. I'm just thinking, I've not even written anything about this, right? So in terms of the process, and I'll give just 2 examples. So in Victoria, British Columbia, I was, again, speaking in terms of how you're literally being orchestrated. It's like something a journey is being rolled in front of you, and you just take that faith and go with it. And I was really, fortunate to be connected to 2 amazing people that we work together on this. Paulina Granger at Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria, and Lina De Guevara. And we basically worked with police officers and community members, and we used theater of the oppressed. We created stories and acted that out, and then invited audience into it, invited police officers and asked them, what need to change and things like that. All right. Now, all of those journey were literally, it was just one step. It was just this guidance that I didn't really I can't really speak how it all came together, to be honest. I just felt like I just found myself in it, which is very interesting in terms of what I, in reflection, some of those things that kind of surprised me in terms of my process. The same thing here in Regina, in Saskatchewan, of course, on the prairies, where I'm working around policing, dialogue, and community. It's still at the nascent stage. But working, I just realized that I'm introduced to one person, to this, to that, and then from there, things start building together. So in terms of that surprise, I just so what I tell myself every day is just trust the process, right? Trust the process. The second thing also is that I've talked about people, and many of them that I can mention in terms of how that then foster a lot of collaboration and things like that. Beyond that, what's also surprising is the rage that actually comes out for me. Rage in the sense that I'm just surprised at the kind of how many lives have been lost, how the way history keep repeating itself, and then there is no really change, in my opinion. All right. I know that with a lot of the abolitionist movement, there was there's a block around immediate emancipation. There is the gradual emancipation and all of that. And I feel for me, I just want to sit in the middle of all of this. Like, how many lives of people that do not identify as this particular race, how many of their lives do we want to lose before we change the curriculum, before we change the training, before we talk about the recruitment process, before we really change the system around policing and the justice system in our world? It's just, and that's where the rage comes out for me. It's like where it's like history keeps repeating itself, people keep dying, and artists keep coming to show their stories to tell. Like, so when is the change gonna happen? All right. And that's when I say the rage from it's like, come on, let's not again, and then some couple of years ago we had issues with Nigeria, for example, with End SARS, with the police movement and other part of the world, not just Nigeria alone. And I'm like, see the UK, and it's like, hey, what, like, I don't know, when is it gonna change? That's the rage for me. That's where it's like, yes, people are willing to share their story. I love the divine guidance. I love the orchestration. I love the collaboration. I love all of those things. But when is things gonna change? When? So that's it. I'm really at that point where I'm asking myself, and that's what is really the surprising thing for me. All right, it's like it's the same story. All right, I get into a community, somebody shared their story with me, and I'm like, this is just not right. And you come to the prairies, particularly Saskatchewan, and you hear about the nightlife tours, and it's like, it's that really, like. So to back to your stories, that that's the thing for the process. That's what I'm getting out of that process for me, and maybe perhaps as I'm not even writing about it at all. It's like, when are things gonna change? So. That's the surprise. That's the most surprising thing for me, to be honest. It's like it's like a circle. It's like when a treadmill. We're not going anywhere, and I'm asking myself, we want to go somewhere, And when is that going to change? And I'll leave it at that. I know we're going to come back again, but I'll leave it at that because that's really where I sit on that.
Yeah. That hits very much in my body. And I'm reminded also by something Omari mentioned in an interview where he was talking about hoping that this is not just like a blip and then these conversations are out of the sphere. So yes, that rage is so real. And every time we see a resurgence of BLM, I know when I saw the resurgence of BLM occurring in 2020, I was like, we've been here before. With Trayvon Martin, we've been here before. And I really, really hope that these commitments that these organizations are making this time will live up to what they're saying. So yeah, that rage lives for sure in this body. So Omari, I would like to take this question to you. It's been really great to hear from Makambe and Tayo about the things that have surprised them throughout. I'm curious for you, what has that thing been for you?
It's interesting. I'm just reflecting on, Sal Capone was written pre-BLM, right? I started writing it and it's interesting now, looking at it from 2007 to now, that what was surprising was seeing this, having this acknowledgement that this rage and frustration and really despair I felt within me was part of the zeitgeist. Like when BLM first emerged, it was heartening and encouraging and depressing simultaneously to see that I wasn't alone in feeling these things. And of course, if you look at from Trayvon Martin all the way to George Floyd, what started off, well, first to me, it was kind of like silence in the mainstream. Then it was sort of this undeniable rumble with BLM. And then by the time, George Floyd's video went viral, it was this roar, right? And it's both surprising to me that this is now part of the zeitgeist, it's part of the mainstream dialogue. I mean, even thinking like today, I spend a lot of time as an educator speaking to high schools and colleges about issues of social justice. And, the fact that today most young people have at least heard the term intersectionality before, whereas in 2007, this was not part of the dialogue and the conversation. So it's surprising to see how far we have come in the movement and how much we've pushed this conversation to the forefront in such a short period of time. And as it relates to my work personally, what I'm always surprised by, and this might seem strange, but I knew that the piece would be polarizing, but I'm always surprised. I remember when the first piece first debuted, I had friends who worked in law enforcement who were enraged at this anti-police piece that I'd written. And I had friends that were, leaned further to the left politically, who were really in the streets as activists and very, very progressive, who were enraged that I wrote a piece that they thought was apologia for police, right? Like it was, and I was in the attempt to tell, and in my opinion, I labeled it in an attempt to tell an honest story. It managed to trigger people on both sides of this conversation in ways that I was very, very surprised by. And the new piece, the early response is even more so. And that always surprises me.
Thank you. That is very interesting. Yeah. And you living in this space where you are, not intentionally wanting something or a reaction to come out, but like it coming. Yeah, that's very interesting that like either side would find some contention with it. But I really find it intriguing when you say that you are interested in telling full stories and not just, one-sided stories. So I think.
If I can add one more thing.
Yes, please.
I think all of us, on whatever side of the political spectrum you lean on, especially in this era of social media, we have a tendency to demonize opposing views. And it's very simplistic when you just say, cops equal evil, bad, end of conversation. Black people equal evil, bad, thugs, end of conversation. And I think when you try to examine the systemic factors that lead to this strife and this tension, and really this system of dehumanization and of murder, it enters into this really tricky, sensitive zone when you're trying to view things from the perspective of why these things keep happening, and not just looking at the individual players, both victims and aggressors in these situations, as poor victims and evil aggressors, right? When you try to unpack the system, it becomes much more complex.
Absolutely. And I think you do that really well through your art. And this question, I'm going to lead it right back to you, Omari, around like, what do you think the role of art is in abolition, transformative justice movements? yes, I see how you do it, and I'm wondering if you could speak to it.
I think art is one of, if not the principal agent of change, especially when it comes to communicating with youth and the mainstream. And examples I'll use is, I would argue that, again, I'm 42 years old, so for me, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet did more for advancing conversations about race relations in America than any academic text or any politician could have done. I think there's some people have a tendency to downplay art and dismiss art as being this sort of fickle, frivolous thing that we don't need. But I don't think that's the case. I think that when you're really trying to reach people in the literal and figurative streets, it's music, it's movies, it's TV, and theater. What I find unique about theater is a medium that is still it's regional, it's local, right? You can have a communal experience and tell specific stories with members of your community who gather and have this singular experience together. And oftentimes, some of my favorite parts of pieces are the talkbacks afterwards. When you hear from the people who experienced this one thing that happened this one night, that sure, the production will happen other nights, but this thing you saw this night only happened here. Like only the people who were in this room experienced this specific version of it. And I think that's what's so powerful and important about theater, is it's local, it's regional, and it hosts a conversation with your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers. In a way that Netflix can't,
Yes, absolutely. That reminds me of how growing up in South Africa, we'd all tune into the same, we tune in at 8 p.m. It's Generations. We have set times where we watch everything, but now with streaming, we've lost that connection with community. So yes, theater is definitely that, bringing together. We just witnessed something together. Let's speak to it. And yeah, love how you speak about how art advances and brings these conversations that might sometimes be very much in the head, very frontal lobe, to life and into the mainstream and into community in very accessible ways. And yeah, it's not, I think, like all the incredible art that we've seen in the past year, it's not a mistake that these concepts like intersectionality have made them their way into schools now. I think art has a big role that it's played in making that possible, for sure. Makambe, can you speak to what role you think art plays in abolition and transformative justice movements?
I think I'm churning in my brain about the greater umbrella of art and then theater specifically, because I feel like theater occupies it's like the niche of all niches that ever niched. Omar, you brought up a great point when you were talking about that theater is partially a huge characteristic of theater is that it's regional, that it exists in a particular time, particular place. And so I feel that the medium of theater I sometimes struggle with the existing structure of theater tradition in the Western world and in this Canadian system where I live and have come up. Because theater seems to, I am always curious about exploring how can we be innovative? How can we do new things within this ancient tradition? But I also feel like that there's something about our medium that continues to hold up old stuff and redo old stuff with new bodies, which has its pros and cons. I love me some ancestry. I love me some traditions. I'm not saying that we should not do old plays, but there's something about the fact that we continue to give our bodies to old interpretations or older interpretations of life that sometimes I feel this really strong tension with are we actually using the thing in the way that it could be used? Like, are there other wider or more innovative ways to tell stories so that they can actually be the agent for change for all of these issues that we're talking about, in a way that I believe that like mediums like film and music, I feel like have been able to have a different reach. And part of that is that like you can share a CD. Remember what those were? You could share a film or like music in a way that you can't share theater. It's like it's a different amount of resources, I guess, to have that physical experience with a group of actors. And so I understand that like our world is built in a way that like those art forms are not disseminated in the same way, and that's part of the reason. But I think that I really believe that like theater could change the world. I think that theater can change the world. I really, 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 really think that. And to be honest, I feel like that is something that is underutilized in our medium. And there's always been work that has pushed boundaries, but I feel that because of the way that we are trained, or the way that I was trained in a very like Eurocentric system where like I went to university in Lethbridge, Alberta, and like I loved my program. I lived my best life. I was really good at school, but we were telling stories. We seldom told even Canadian stories, much less now when we got to the Canadian stories. Who was looking like Makambe Simamba? No. Like I was playing white people. I was playing like there was not I wasn't trained with the sense of urgency. We would talk about it and we would read essays about like theater is supposed to hold up a mirror to life so that society can look in that mirror and be like, oh my gosh. But like in truth, like I didn't feel urgency in most of the work that I used to develop the tools that have helped me get where I am today. So I think that disconnect is really, really important to acknowledge. And if we're teaching the next generation of, first of all, young people are incredible. Auntie Makambe loves you, young people. Like if we're teaching the next generation of 17, 18, like that generation of people, that like our art form is a place where you do plays written by a guy who never stepped foot on this continent, who died 600 years ago, and like, cool, like, yo, like Romeo and Juliet, that's a bop. I really like that play. But if you're, do you know what I mean? Like if that doesn't live in your body in the same way, so think about it. You're going to school, you're playing, I was in an adaptation of R&J, and it was so fun, right? But it's like, I was there in my little corset, I was in second year, I was doing my little monologues, like, you know, like I have that experience within the rehearsal hall where I feel like, oh my gosh, here's a place where I feel like the reason I'm doing this degree, to the dismay of my African immigrant parents, is because I feel alive here. I feel like there's some soul alchemy. There's something happening here. And I go into that room and I'm learning how to tap into this magic. I'm learning how to emote and tap into something that's spiritual. And the role that I'm given is Juliet, and she's cool. She's cool. We like you, Juliet. However, there is so much more that I can do. And there's so much more of my experience and ancestry that I actually cannot fully put into that, because that's not really what it was made for. Right. So then I have that experience. Let's say, you know, I play the role, I body it, because, you know, we work hard and we like to do things well. Then I go outside and I'm standing on the street, and that same body is having a very different experience because of how people look at me, how I'm followed around the Shoppers Drug Mart, how people, even when they're well-meaning, are telling me that, wow, my English is really good. So there's this huge disconnect. And I feel like the way that we create theater has a lot to do with, I feel like changing that would have to do with a lot of how we train and just how we think about theater, and just understanding that there are way more options available to us than we are actually using. So I think that in the best case scenario, the role of art in these in revolution and change is to, like Omari said, like to be just the principal agent. But I feel frustrated by the fact that it's underutilized. And I think that I'm not the only, like, like our father, sons, lovers, little brothers, and that subject matter and Trayvon, that means a lot to me. But like, there are so many other issues that every single person on this earth is walking around with and carrying, whether that be climate change, whether that be the bees, whether that be whatever it is that whatever it is that you feel called to. And I just don't feel like we quite fully know how to use the tools of this beautiful thing that we love to actually tap into that intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I really want to rearticulate you saying that like the role of art in transformative justice also like the power of that to happen is also in theater being very open and not just through this Western lens. And yeah. So once educators, you got work to do. You gotta open up what theater means so that this power of art to change and to form revolution can occur. And I see that in a lot of work that Taiwo does as well, which is not like theater with the big T, you know? So yes, I'm gonna pass this to Taiwo to tell us what you think the role of art in abolition and transformative justice movements are. And I'd be interested to know through the way that you the way that you practice your art, if that makes sense, because it moves away from this restricting way of doing theater, and it's very community based. And I think that's the direction that that's the direction that I'd like to see theater go into as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think Makembe and Omari just nailed it. I think that question of curriculum, it's how we train in institutions really need to change, and I think that's one of the impetus for. So in my university here, University of Regina, we're launching a new program by September. It's called BFA in Device Theater and Theater Creation, Device Performance and Theater Creation, I believe. I may be getting the name wrongly. I think that's it. Device Performance and Theater Creation. And I think the reason for that is that theater needs to respond to where we are at in terms of training and curriculum and all of that. And so for me personally, I always say that because I did my initial training back in Nigeria, and when we speak about social change, activism, revolution, particularly within the context of the African continent, we want to look to theater. We want to, for example, in South Africa, you think of market theater, all right, or in Nigeria during the military era, we think of theater, or in other parts of the continent, right? So in my own training, it was sort of imbued in me, in us, that theater has to be that mirror that holds up to the community, to the society, all right? Two is that we don't do theater for theater's sake, all right? It has to be responsive, immediate, urgent. There's always that, that has given me that thinking around how can I use theater for whatever, right? And hence my working with different spaces, right? Speaking and that I think that's the strength of that I bring to the system here. When I now got into the system here, I realized that okay, well, I love this great 600-year-old stuff we're working on. That's beautiful, but how can I center my work to talk about healthcare? How can I talk without having to go back to 600 years ago? Because the story of the people that are living right now, their stories are not just only current, but they are valid. So how can I then use that as a way to then share the lived experience? So that's that. I'll put that in the parking lot. I think, just to reiterate what Makembe and Omari says, is that I think that in terms of curriculum and training and post-secondary and all of that, we need to rethink that so that our theater can start doing the appropriate representation, telling the right story, and also start putting in the right mindset. For me, I feel like when I'm doing the kind of theater that I do is called applied theater, going to community, I devise, there's nothing preempt, nothing written. We go there, we work with stories from communities and all of that. It's in those moments that there's that aha moment where people's mindsets start changing. Somebody, for example, I finished the performance, the Onion Theater project, another project that I did with refugee and immigrants and international students in Victoria. And a professor walked up to me that he's been teaching in that particular university for 15 years, and he didn't know why many students, particularly Asian students, China and Japan and South Korea, why they change their name when they come to Canada and they have to be a name like Krista or Apple or something. And he said it was during that performance that he saw that. And so he said after that performance, he made a commitment that each time he's teaching moving forward, that anytime his students come, Asian students come to his class and they bear a different name, he would find a way in a respectful way to say, I'm happy that this is your name, but are there other names that you want us to know? And then he will find ways to actually engage with them so that he can get to know them beyond the English name that they've given to them. Because the reason why they give themselves the English name is basically because of us. We can't pronounce it, and they, and all of that. All right. So the point is that it's this kind of work that would change, that it has a way of helping us to see things differently. And then, connecting that abolition movement is that I always take my own piece of inspiration again from my own training back in Nigeria and in Africa. Is that a lot of the political movements, a lot of the revolution and resistance that we have on the continent, and I can speak specifically to Nigeria, there was the place of theater and art in general. In fact, many of the military governments, rulers decided to actually attack journalists, playwrights, actors, and performers. They excommunicated them. Some of them, they killed them because they know that their art was just making people, it was challenging them. And an example is the late Ken Saro-Wiwa. It was this kind of guy that was really speaking against, the corporation that they go to extract the oil, the big corporation like Shell and Chevron and all of that. And then what happened to him? All right, the guy was killed. So that's an example of how, and I always go to that because that's something that I think to a certain extent many people heard about it. Another person is Wole Soyinka from Nigeria, who through his work, during the time of military era, he had to go and serve exile. He was being looked at after, because they wanted to, annihilate him. And there are many other examples like that. So I think that that's the beauty of the work of what we have. And I think that if we take from that and then intentionally rethinking the Western idea of theater, it's not about being cool. It's not about aesthetics alone. There's so much about it that I think we need to put in that energy into that and then use that theater to uphold the realities that we want.
Thank you so much, Taiwo. And that made me realize that, people in power always know about how powerful theater is, because I'm also reminded by the people who were exiled during the apartheid era. They're like some really giant, like Eskia Mphahlele, for example, who's a writer and was exiled. Hugh Masekela, for example, who's a great musician and jazz artist, was great friends with Fela Kuti as well. So those people were exiled, and that speaks to the power of art that people and those in power know of. So we should not, as artists, take that for granted. There's a lot of urgent topics that we need to talk about, and it's important to not just have theater, as you mentioned, Taiwo, just like be for theater's sake. Like there's a lot in the world that needs moving forward. So yes, we need to bring that to life and yes, move forward. I am going to ask a closing question here. This has been great. I wish I could talk to you forever, and I would. So I am curious, we will start with Makambe on this one. Through the work that you're doing, what's one thing you can envision about the future you are building?
I've had a lot of incredible, humbling, exciting experiences throughout my creation and now sharing of our fathers, sons, lovers, and little brothers. But consistently, my very, very, very most favorite thing is when a young person comes up to me and says, "This is the first play I've ever seen." That means something to me. That really means something to me. This is the first, and I've had this exact comment come my way from youth of all backgrounds, but specifically when I'm speaking to or connect with like a Black teenager, and they come up to me and they say, "That was so cool. This is the first piece of theater I've ever seen." I'm like, holy, what an honor. And I'm so excited for you. I'm excited for you that the first play that you saw is me because I look like you, and that this piece is it's hip hop, it's joy, it is the embodiment of how our bodies move. Like, I literally made it for you, so thank you for coming. I'm humbled that the first piece that, you know, some of these young people are seeing themselves in is about a dead teenager and all the people the dead teenager represents. So to your question about like what I'm imagining for the future of the piece, I hope that I can continue to plant that seed, whatever it is, for all of these different young minds, and that the generation of work that they create is somehow built off of what my particular experience was. I would love for, you know, the 16-year-old I met last week to not have to make a play with the subject matter that, you know, I have. But if they do, and if that is the case, because that is the world that they are also living in, that there is somehow a useful or nourishing or conscious point from before, or a reference point that they can go from. So I just imagine moving forward with that intention, and just like whatever it is, that way that is going to manifest for the next generation and the people who are coming after us.
Thank you. Thank you, Makambe. Omari, through this work you're doing, what's one thing you can envision about the future you are building?
I envision a future where there are more people who look like us in theater in general, both in the audience watching theater, and I hope that this will be prompted by more people who look like us writing, directing, and acting in theater. And it's interesting. I think it will be like a lot of revolutions are. It will be a messy change, because I think we have a younger generation that is unwilling to accept some of the stuff that past generations tolerated from their institutions and from their artists. So I'm really excited for the radical change that the next generation will bring in. And I think the process will be a messy one, but it'll be a necessary one.
Yeah, absolutely. Messy, but necessary. Yes. Thank you, Taiwo. And my bad. I was thinking about Taiwo coming up. Thank you, Omari, very much.
It's all good.
Thank you. Taiwo, I would like for you to speak a little bit to, the previous question, just wrap us up a little bit here, as well as, speak on that thought that just came for a second, as well as tell us what you envision, the future you envision building from the work you're doing.
Thank you. What I wanted to add earlier on, just to tie that to, is the fact that I think that, and it also ties to the future, is that we want to bring that break that single story narrative, but it's always about one person, one race, one that it seems that, and that idea of not giving space for others, other perspective, the nuance of our existence. I'm hoping that 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 kind of future will not exist again. That it will be whether in our curriculum, in our training, in the performance we put on stage, in the communities, that we can be robust and built enough that our capacity can actually have other people in. And so here's my hope, really. Here's my hope that emotions, that affect, that empathy might move us to social action. And that's very important because I think that the currency, and I'm using the word currency intentionally, the currency that we have in the world of art and theater is affect, right? That it can move us, is the ability to empathize, right? That can move us to social action. That empathy also might challenge us and enhance our critical thinking capacity, because that's very critical to us being able to have a change of perspective, a change of mindset. I think it's a mindset that I think once one race is over is better than the other. That empathy can help us to change that perspective so that we can also all beckon to a future that is characterized by equity. And equity is important, whether from an intersectionality standpoint, from whatever standpoint we want, that at the heart of it will be equity. And that's the future. That's what drives me every day when I wake up to do what I'm doing, to connect with great, minds like all of you here today, and to those that will also be watching us. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Taiwo. Thank you, Omari. Thank you, Makambe, for sharing your genius, for continuing to create through what Taiwo in the beginning told us is very hard work and good heart work as well for those who receive it. I am deeply, deeply in gratitude to every single one of you. And for audience members checking this out in the future, these works are available for you to check out. I know Makambe's will be reinstalling very soon. And yes, every single one of you, I'm in deep gratitude for. And we're just going to close here before I just start rambling about how much I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you very much to the NAC. Thank you to the support that my co-curator, Nikki Shafila, has provided throughout this. And it was such a pleasure meeting you. And I cannot wait to meet you all in person one of these days. Any closing thoughts from folks before we wrap here?
I just want to say that we're launching a series of web conversation around policing, dialogue, and community starting 22nd of April, and it's going to be once every month till October. And again, that's because we want to create a space for dialogue, because like we're saying, the theater should be a space where we have that conversation. So it's happening. I'm happy to send all of that details. Just wanted to plug that in, but I'm hoping that we can actually connect to that.
Yes, and for folks trying to connect to that, it's called the Future Prairie Theaters.
It's called the Center. It's the Center for Socially Engaged Theater.
The Center for Social Engaged Theater. And is that the web series of like 10 sessions?
Oh, that's done. That's
done. Okay. I see. Alrighty.
That's for the
Alrighty. All right. Moving on to the next, he said. We checked that. All right.
We're still on it.
Very impressive. Okay. Very, very awesome. All right. Thank you. Omari, anything you'd like to plug for folks to check out soon?
No, just thank you for having me on this panel. It's been an honor to have this conversation with all of you, and just support work by Black theater creators.
Yes.
Go to the theater, create your own theater.
Yes, absolutely. Echo that. And yes, the information about the police project that Taiwo was talking about can be found at CSET, so that's CSET.ca. And Makambe, my love, anything you'd like to close us off on?
Sure. I'm thinking about my beautiful friend and sibling Nasra Adam, and they always remind me that I am one of the Black lives that I am fighting for. So they're always like, drink your water, take a nap, eat a vitamin. So I just want to offer the energy of nourishment and care and like self softness to all Black folks and everybody watching and tuning in. Thank you very much for your energy, and thank you, Poe, for your beautiful facilitation.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Yes, everybody drink your water, moisturize. Yes, and be fed and receive care. Thank you very much, Nasra, for that. We are the Black lives we're fighting for as well. Have a good day, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Alrighty. Perfect.